My name's Miss Sam, and I'm fixing to show you how to make a crispy, flaky pie crust that you don't have to chill. And I don't know about you, but when I want desserts, I'd rather have them sooner than later. So the first thing that I'm going to mention is I really hope that you have already seen my video on how to make biscuits. Why? Because the techniques that you learn in making homemade biscuits directly transfer into making pie crust. And making biscuits is just a little bit simpler and easier. So once you've figured out how to do that well, it is a natural step into making pie crust. So if you haven't gone and watched it and you haven't made you a batch of biscuits yet, I would suggest that you do it. You don't have to, but it does make it easier to begin making pie crust. And if you did watch my video, then maybe you remember that I said those thick, luscious, puffy layers are from good old lard. Well, that is what we're going to use in this pie crust today, because it is going to make the flaky tenderness in our pie crust, and it helps to keep it from being soggy. I know there's a lot of debate between whether butter or lard is better in a pie crust, and most of the really influential pastry chefs will admit that lard is the way to make your pastry the flakiest. However, they will often substitute half and half butter and half lard, because they like the flavor of butter and they like the flakiness that the lard gives. I have made all butter crusts. I've made them lots of times. They're delicious, but I only make them when I know we're going to eat the whole pie in that one day, which with my boys, that's not super hard. But by the next day, the texture of a butter crust begins to change. It begins to soften, and it gets soggy much easier than a lard crust does. The fat in the butter and the lard are of two different types, and the lard just helps it to stay crispier for longer. This is my grandma's and my mom's recipe, and it is just a winner. Not only that, I told you this is a no-chill recipe. With butter pastries, you definitely need at least a half-hour chill. So we're going for fast, instant gratification here, and you are not going to believe how easy this comes together. First off, I'm going to tie my apron on, because if y'all have ever seen me before, you know I am a pig in the kitchen. I'm going to get this tied on, and don't worry about keeping up with measurements and all, because I'm going to have the measurements listed at the end. What I'm going to make is I'm going to make a single crust, pie crust, and I'm going to show you how to blind bake it. We'll talk about that later on. However, I'm also going to give you the recipe for a double pie crust on the bottom, say fruit filling in the middle, crust on the top. Two different amounts. I'll give you the recipe for both of those at the end. And I'm just going to jump right in here. We have everything out on the table that I am going to need. The most important things, of course, are your rolling pin. I have a marble one. I love it so much. Not only does the weight of it help you to roll things out, but the coolness does also. And this is one of my favorite tools. I talked about it in biscuit making. This is a vintage cutter. This was my great-grandma's, and it is going to help us cut the lard into the flour. Our ingredients are flour, salt, water, and lard. The end. No leavening like in biscuits, because we don't want it to rise. We want it to stay nice and thin and crisp. So I'm going to put a cup and a half of flour, just plain old regular all-purpose flour in here, like so. And then I'm going to put a heaping half teaspoon of salt. And there, you want it to have salt, because otherwise it's just very bland and tasteless. The salt brings out everything. Then we are going to put in a half cup of our lovely lard. This gives a whole new meaning to tub of lard, doesn't it? Use our lard here. Smooth that off. Like I say, we only need a half cup in here. Put that in the flour. Now, you may not be able to see me as well when I cut this in, but if you have not done the biscuit recipe, this is what your apron's for. Please go back and look, because I bring the camera right up over my shoulder and I show you exactly what it looks like when I am cutting the fat into the flour. You can see here is the lard. I'm going to cover it over with flour, press it out into the bottom just a little bit to get it flattened out there. And this is what I do with the pastry cutter. I just go in and literally cut. And if it sticks in there, we wipe it on through with our fingers. And it's kind of a pushing and scraping motion. Like I say, I went into this more in biscuit making and show you exactly how it looks as I go along. I am pushing down and scraping with my pastry cutter, and it is making the pieces of fat get smaller and smaller and incorporate with the flour. And it's going to look what they call shaggy here in just a minute. You do not have to have, some people say, the pea-size amounts of fat. That is not true. We just want to have nice shaggy bits that have that fat in between. Those are going to be the layers that swell up and create flakiness in the crust. So this is perfect. There are big chunks and small chunks and everything else. This is what we need, just like this. Perfectly good. And now I have a 1/3 cup of water in here, and I'm going to put about half of it in. Just kind of pour it all over in there. Use my spoon, stir that about a bit. And then I'm going to put the rest on there. And stir that in. And if you have any spots that are moist, you can use the back of your spoon and sort of press that into it. Use the back of your spoon like I'm doing and press it, and see how it's already doing flakiness in there? That is what we want. Go around in all of that flour and press down in there. That's us smearing the fat and the water into the flour. Okay. Clean our spoon off here. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. You see how it's in shaggy bits and it's kind of all come up and incorporated. Now we're just going to bring it together, and that is as simple as just sort of scooping it all over to the side, just like I showed you in the biscuit recipe. And I'm going to, I don't know if you can see, there's still some dry in the corner down in here, a little bit of dry flour. That is okay, and I'm going to tell you why. It is better to have a little bit less water than you need for all of the flour than to put too much water in your pie crust. Too much water, you can't roll it out properly. It sticks to things, it wants to tear, and if you try to add more flour, you end up with tough dough. So it is actually better to have your nice mound over here that is incorporated with the fat and the water and have a little bit that's dry that you just leave in the bowl than it is to have it too soppy. So we've got it all over to the side, and I'm just going to squish it with my hand like this, bring it all together, and do you see that? All I did was bring it to the side, and this is my lump of dough. This is my pie dough. And this is the non-moistened, drier flour that I'm simply going to leave in the bowl because I didn't need that. I'm just going to take this and kind of form it into a sort of a lump. Do you see what I mean about a pig throwing crust, and I haven't even started yet? Okay, so I've just sort of got it shaped into a little lump like that. I'm going to wipe my hands off, and I'm going to get me a chunk of wax paper, not parchment paper. I'm going to get me a chunk of wax paper, and I'm going to put it out here, move that so you can see better, and I'm going to come in here and put my lid down like so. And I am going to generously flour this wax paper. Now some recipes say don't hardly add any flour because you're going to make it tough. This is not that recipe. So I've got me a good coating over it, and I'm going to lay this out on here, press it out a little bit, and I'm actually going to come back under where I have sucked up all that flour, put a little bit more on there, and then I'm going to gently flour the top. If you have a wooden rolling pin, you can actually take flour in your hand and rub on it like this, and it will flour your wooden rolling pin. It doesn't stick to a marble rolling pin, so it doesn't do me any good, but I just want to tell you that if you have a wooden rolling pin. And now we are just going to start pressing it out, up and down, and then we're going to go out to the sides. The rolling out is just simple, but maybe you'll see that it stuck just a hair to some of these different spots, and you can see I've got a little bit of dough on there. I'm going to come back. I'm going to give it another little snowflakey dusting again, and I'm going to keep on rolling out. And rolling out the pie dough to the correct thickness is probably the hardest part to learn. Some people like thick dough, sometimes they like really thin dough. The thinner dough usually does not have a good flake to it because it needs to have a little bit of thickness to be able to actually have the flakiness. If it's too thick, it can be glommy and doughy and not cook up nicely and maybe have a soggy bottom. And nobody likes a soggy bottom, right? So we are going to roll this out like so. And as I'm going, you may see that I'll put my hand on it as I go along because I'm feeling. And when I teach this to high school students, taught lots of high school students how to do pie crust, my best friend, lots of different people, my kids, you're going to learn just by putting your hand on it how much thicker it is in different areas. And you may be able to see that this part that I'm pushing away is a lot thicker than others. So when you do it, put your hand in different spots and see if you can tell this is the much thicker portion. And this is the thinner portion, and it gets much thinner out to the edges. That's simply the way that it is. So I have rolled it out to a point where I like it. And I forgot to get me a knife. So I'm going to run and go get a knife real quick. Maybe. Okay. And all I need that for is I have my pie pan here. And I'm going to set it in there kind of towards the middle of everything, and I'm just going to go around and I'm going to cut about 2 inches out from around the sides of my pie pan, like so. And then I'm going to take all of this, and this, my friend, is the chef's treat. Of course, when my boys were home, it was their treat too. But anyway, you can roll this out a little bit thinner, lay it out on a cookie sheet and sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar. And while your pie is cooking, this cooks up and you get to snack on that delicious cinnamon pastry strips while you're waiting for your pie to be done. Okay, and now that I have the outline of my pie pan there, I don't know if you can see the thinness of this pie dough. So this is just about the right thinness right here. I'm not sure if you can see it. If I had someone over there, I would have them zoom in on this. But this is the thickness that I like to have my pie crust. And why did I do it on wax paper? I did not do it on wax paper just so that it doesn't stick to my table or anything like that. I did it because I'm going to plop this in this bowl just for now. Trust me, I am not throwing it away. Because this is my little secret that makes life so much nicer. You take it and you fold it like that. And then you take it and you fold it like this. And you have a perfect pie crust that does not stick, that did not rip, and that is just ready to go right here. When you get it, unfold it and lay it in half of your pie pan like so. Then fold it out the rest of the way and you should be just about lined up. And then you have a lovely pie crust that is ready to go right into your pan. Now here is another thing. Pie crust, while we did not knead it, we did not do like biscuits, we did not get our ball and we didn't knead it the 8 or 9 times. We simply let it sit because we don't want it to be tough. It does have some gluten in it, simply because it's bread flour or all-purpose flour. We don't want it to be worked, and it's a little bit springy. So literally, if I took this and stretched it and put it over the side, I could do like that, and when I cooked it, it would shrink back to its original shape. We don't want that. So what you want to do is you want to do it like it was a piece of cloth, and you want to drape it down inside of there. Don't smash it in and think you're going to be able to stretch it to fit the contours, because that's not going to work. So you're going to take it like a piece of cloth and you're going to just drape it and tuck it down to make sure that it is down in all of those crevices of your pie pan and that it sits down in there real nice. Once you have it down in there, you're going to want to come around and press with your fingers around the outside rims of it right here. Not hard. If you press it too hard, you'll sort of glue it to the side and your slices won't want to come out. How hard do you need to do it? You may see I have a little bit of fingerprints on there. just as hard as you would touch your arm if you had a bruise to see how it felt. Not hard, but firm enough to see where that bruise was. So just a little bit of touch along there. And you can see I've got a lot more crust on some sides than I do on other sides. That's fine, because I'm going to come back. And in these spots where I have more, I'm just going to come along here. And I'm going to nip some of that off. And that's about even all the way around, if you can see. And now there are a million different ways that you can do the edge on your pie crust. One of the things that I really love is to get out like leaf shape cutters, heart shape cutters, whatever. My fingers are completely covered. And cut out different designs and put them around the edge. A pumpkin pie that has maple leaves all the way around the outside is absolutely beautiful. There's all different things you can do, but one of the most common is to flute the edges. It's just kind of the classic look to a pie. And how do you do that? You pick up the edge and you're going to turn all of these under just a bit to kind of make a roll on the top. Get it off from hanging over the edge. And if you have a spot like that, I don't know if you can see it, that's just kind of separated where I tore it just a little bit. Just sort of stick it back together and fold those pieces together, and you'll never even notice that it was like that. So just keep coming all the way around. Just kind of fold that edge up and under, like so. Keep going on around. And there we are, back to the beginning again. Make sure that it's all tucked under nice. You don't have any lumps sticking out around the edges. So that's what it looks like now. And then we're going to come back and we're going to flute it. And all that is you're going to take the dough and you're going to push with your thumb inside of it, and you're going to make these little V shapes. And how you do it is you do just like that. And you go around like so. See how it makes those little bird's beaks? Just put your fingers like a pincher and press in with your thumb and go all the way around. And I like rustic pies, and so if it looks a little wonky or it's just not all completely the same, that's perfectly fine, because you don't want to make it look like it's, what is it, Mrs. Smith's frozen pie from the grocery store or something. You want people to look at it and be salivating already because they know that it is homemade. So there is your crimped pie crust. Doesn't that look beautiful? Yeah. Okay, and now I'm going to show you how to bake blind. First, I'm going to come over here and make sure that you are still on. Hang on one second. Okay, so we have our lovely fluted pie crust all the way around there. And now, because we did a single crust, say you want to bake a pumpkin pie or do a berry pie that's open topped, you can either blind bake it or you can just put the filling in it and bake it while it's raw. That's perfectly fine. I am actually going to do this as a chocolate custard with a coffee whipped cream on top. This is our Monday night family dinner, and so everybody's going to be there, and my boys really like that. But if you want to bake the pie crust beforehand, and most recipes will specify whether they want you to or not, that simply means that you're going to bake it empty. And if you just put it in there and you bake it like this, remember how I said it's going to make these nice fluffy layers, these crusty layers in between there? It can swell up in the bottom, get bubbles, it can get all distorted out of shape if you cook it just like this. So what we want to do is we want to sit it down there, and this is parchment paper. Parchment paper can go in the oven, wax paper cannot. Wax paper will burn. Parchment paper is good up to, I believe, 500 degrees. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a piece of parchment paper bigger than a piece of pie, and you're going to crumple them up. Because if it's already crumpled up in all different directions, it is going to be easier to press into the rounded shape of the pie. I used to use tinfoil because that's what my mama used, and it works well. But honestly, it seems like tinfoil traps humidity underneath a little bit, and of course tinfoil reflects, and so it seemed like it took a little bit longer to cook. So I'm going to take my parchment paper and I am simply going to gently, hopefully without messing up my outside edges, I'm going to tuck it down inside of my pie pan like so. And I'm going to fill it with pie beads. Now what are pie beads? They're little balls of clay. And you don't have to have these. My mama bought them for me as a Christmas present one year, and they are fantastic. So if you want to bake pies a lot, this is a good investment. I don't think they're more than $5 or $6 for a big old bunch of them. However, you can use beans or rice. I always use plain old brown beans, and you pour them in there. Of course, you can't cook them later. They're just for pies then. But the problem with that is they smell terrible while it's cooking. My boys would always complain. They would come in and they'd be like, what is that smell? And it was the raw beans in here, the dried beans cooking. I got tired of that, and so Mama got me pie beans. And so all you need to do is pour them in there until you have a nice even layer that is going to hold your parchment down, and in doing so, hold the bottom of your pie crust down to where it can't puff up and make bubbles and get all distorted. So we have that all ready. The oven is on at 375 degrees, and I am going to put this pie crust in there and I'm going to blind bake it. I'm going to bake it for probably about 15 to 17 minutes with this in it. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to take this out, and we're going to continue baking the base so that it will get nice and dry and done, and not have this sitting in there to trap the moisture. And then we'll let it cool and it'll be ready to fill. And you will have made your first pie crust. Okay, I'm going to go put this in, and then we'll be right back. All right. So I am going to clean my hands off and straighten up the table, and when that has finished baking, we will be right back. Okay, so I'm back. This has been in for 15 minutes, and I am going to gather up the edges of this parchment paper, and I'm going to set it over to the side here. Still very hot. I'm not going to pour it into my jar yet. And hopefully you can see that the edges of this have started to get nicely brown and golden, and you can see that the bottom is almost done, but there are, hopefully you can see it, there are small spots that you can see that are damp on the bottom. That's why we're going to tuck it back in, and we're going to continue baking it. But do you see how there's no bubbling, no distortion? It fits the pie pan perfectly. That is exactly what we want. That's going to be a pretty crust. And I wanted to show you this too. This is our cinnamon crusts that I baked up and put the cinnamon sugar on it, and look at that. Do you see how it came into two flaky pieces? That is how our pie crust is going to be. It's going to be flaky and wonderful. And while I had it in there, I was thinking, how could I tell you the thickness that I rolled out the pie crust? Because I don't think that you were probably able to tell it just looking. And I looked up and it said that a lot of recipes said to roll your dough out the thickness of 2/4 laying on top of each other. I measured it to my crust, and I don't roll mine that thick. I like it just a little bit thinner. I roll my pie crust about 1/4 and 1/2. So instead of having to break out a ruler, you could actually take out quarters and see that you want it to be just a little bit thinner than 2/4 stacked. At least that's my personal preference. Now I am going to take this pie crust and I'm going to pop this back into the 375-degree oven for probably 12 to 15 more minutes, I will tell you. And when all of this dampness is gone and the outside edge is beautifully golden, then it's going to be ready. So I'm going to go put this back in, and I don't know if you can see, but I have my pot and some of my ingredients on the counter, and I am already starting to make the filling to go in my pie. So we're going to have a pie crust done in the amount of time that it would have taken to chill butter crust. Pretty fantastic, huh? Alright, I'm going to go throw this in and I'll show you when it's done. Okay, so the crust is out of the oven, and as you can see, it's a beautiful golden brown all over. And this is the cool thing. If it is perfectly done and baked all the way through, you can actually lift it and take it out. Perfectly baked. And you know, this is amazing also because lots of times when you enter a pie in the fair, they only want to have a portion. So either a half of a pie or a fourth of a pie. And it's really hard to cut a pie and to deliver it nicely unless your pie is firm enough to be able to stand together. And so then when you cut it, you can make a really beautiful section of pie to take to the fair or to a contest or wherever you want to take it. My pie crust is done. I'm going to let it sit here and cool. I actually already have my pie filling made. I'm going to strain it into my pie crust, and after a little bit I'm going to be able to show it to you with its dark chocolate custard inside and its coffee whipping cream on top. And we're going to have this perfect crispy crust as the perfect counterpoint to it. And I'm going to go and get my pie filling ready, and then I'll be able to show it to you later. And this is cool, so I'm going to eat some of that here in a minute too. Alright, so my dark chocolate custard filling has set. You can see how nicely wiggly it is and bouncy it is. And it is ready for its coffee whipped cream to go on top. And I'm going to tell you a little story. The very first time that I went to Thanksgiving with my future husband's family, I offered to bring a pie. And they seemed to be a little bit surprised about that. I think maybe because I was 19 years old and they thought I was probably going to bring a store-bought pie. But I took my little pie, and his sisters oohed and awed over my pie crust and talked all about it. And then one of them said, "Do you put vinegar in your pie crust?" Well, I had never heard of such a thing, and so I thought that they did not like me and they were making fun of me. So that kind of hurt my feelings at the time, but you know what? Fast forward 25 years. My husband and I have been married for 25 years, and I adore my sisters-in-law. And I will tell you that I have made a pie crust with vinegar in it, and it is not one tiny little bit better than this pie crust right here. What is the moral of this story? I was never told that making a pie or pie crust was supposed to be hard or something that was unattainable. And so I was never intimidated by it. And you know what, sugar? You should not be either. I want you to get in the kitchen and just bake up a storm and have a good time. And I really hope, throwing chocolate everywhere, I really hope that this has encouraged you to want to make your own pie crust and to feel confident about it. I mean, look at this pie. Isn't that lovely? I know my boys are going to enjoy eating it. So if you would like to have the recipe for the custard and whipped topping of this pie, please go to my blog. It is MissSamWearsDresses.blogspot.com, and I share all kinds of recipes, farm life, my love of vintage clothing, all different kinds of things. And sugar, I would love for you to come and visit me. And thank you very much for putting up with me through all of this, and I hope that you all have a lovely day. Bye!